Hope you guys enjoyed that little Dead Space themed intro. I've been wanting to do that for a while now because I feel like Nidus, with his specific customization options, has always kind of reminded me a bit of a Necromorph, and he's the infested frame, so it just makes sense. And today I've got a couple of builds for you for this Warframe, doing a little build refresh for the year, giving you guys a couple of builds and playstyles that I've been using, as well as breaking down his kit for anyone that is unfamiliar with him. And with that being said, let's jump into his kit real quick. Nidus technically has two passives, the first being his mutation stacks. Whenever you hit enemies with your first ability, you'll gain stacks, as you can see in the bottom right of your HUD. The higher these stacks go, the more damage your 1 and your 4 will do. We'll talk about the 4's damage and how it applies said damage later. At base you can get up to 100 stacks. The second part of his passive is that if Nidus dies during combat, you'll consume 15 mutation stacks as long as you have 15 available within your pool at that given moment. Those 15 are consumed, and then this grants 5 seconds of invulnerability and restores health to 50%. It's basically like a get out of jail free card, and this at base with no augments has no cooldown whatsoever. So as long as you are constantly gaining yourself stacks, you can keep dying over and over, gaining this invulnerability and health regen period. As we describe the rest of this kit and you guys learn how to play him, you'll understand that this frame is basically immortal. His first ability is Virulence. Nidus will stomp the ground, sending out infested spikes in a straight line. These will grant him mutation stacks, do damage, and refund you energy per hit. And at 100 stacks, you'll do a bunch of damage, and this is a really strong ability and is the most important part of his kit. You can also hold down the ability to see a display in front of you of where your trail is going to go when you cast it. The second ability is a single cast CC called Lava. Send out tendrils in front of you and they will pull enemies into the cast point, and any enemies killed whilst they're held by the tendrils have a chance of giving you a mutation stack. Of course, the combination here is to group them up with lava and then spam your virulence on the enemy to gain as many stacks as possible. But the synergies don't end there. Your third ability, Parasitic Link, does not cast with energy. Instead, you'll consume a mutation stack to link to either an enemy or an ally. Linking to an ally will grant them a power strength bonus, and when you link to an enemy, you'll get damage reduction, basically putting up to 90% of the damage that you are taking onto the enemy that you are linked with instead of you. But another synergy worth noting is that any enemy you are linked with will also send out your first ability, Virulence, when you cast it. So if you Parasitic Link to an enemy, cast your Lava, and then use Virulence, you'll be sending out 2 casts of Virulence from the direction of both you and the Parasitic linked enemy. And finally, his fourth ability, Ravenous, much like your third, also only costs mutation stacks to cast, albeit it costs 3 mutation stacks instead of 1. You make a patch on the ground made out of infestation where maggots spawn in and attack enemies. Standing in this area will also heal you and your allies, and this speed of heal is affected by a power strength. Hitting enemies with your first ability, Virulence, will also detonate these maggots to do a large amount of blast damage, and every enemy hit will also grant you a mutation stack. And to go back on what I was talking about earlier in regards to the damage and how this is affected by stacks, the damage of both your Virulence and your explosions from your maggots is affected by how many stacks you have. So the more stacks, the more damage. So the rotation of abilities is to quickly build your stacks by grouping enemies with lava, then spamming them with virulence. This is very energy sustainable as well because you get energy return upon hitting enemies with the virulence. Get a few stacks up, link to one of the enemies with Parasitic Link, preferably a heavy target because they'll survive longer. Build up a few more stacks, then cast Ravenous, and then proceed to Lava, Virulence, over and over, using that dual Virulence cast from Parasitic Link, getting all the explosions off, getting more and more stacks, more and more damage, healing you and your allies with your Ravenous at the same time, building up your stacks as fast as possible to basically be unkillable as well as do a bunch of damage. Now, Nidus is mainly a slower Warframe that does better in endless missions because the longer you can stay in a mission and build up your stacks, the more powerful you'll be. He's not great for slower missions. There are some niche setups you can do, but for me personally, I just really like using him as an endless Warframe and one that gets stronger the longer you stay in the mission. Nidus has some really powerful augments that we're going to be looking at in both builds today. One of them uses a different augment compared to the other. The first we're looking at is Parasitic Vitality. This is basically a Vitality exclusive or alternate version available for only Nidus, so you can't equip this and Vitality at the same time. Think of it as binding your Vitality to your Parasitic link, except the health bonus you gain scales off of your stacks. Linking to an enemy will grant you a massive amount of HP, especially if you are at maximum stacks, much more than a regular Vitality would, and if you link to a teammate it will grant them the HP. And when we look at the second build, you'll notice there's another mod that also synergizes with this in a different way. The second augment I want to talk about for the first build is called Teaming Virulence. Hitting 4 enemies with your first ability Virulence will grant you 120% critical chance for your primary weapon for 15 seconds, and this buff scales with power, strength and duration. I do wish this was for all of his weapons, even though it's just for his primary, it's still extremely strong. So let's jump into the first build real quick, which is my personal favourite. We're going with almost maximum power strength with growing power, blind rage, Umbral Intensify, Transient Fortitude, and more augmented, crunch your foot so we don't get knocked down, Umbral Fiber, and then instead of Umbral Vitality we're using Parasitic Vitality because we can get much more HP from this when we're linked to an enemy, Adaptation for even more damage reduction, Teaming Virulence, mentioned already, so get a large amount of crit on my primary weapon, Stretch so the range of our abilities is actually good. This is extremely important, and some people may even want to use Overextended in here. If anything, it might feel even better, especially on your lava. And finally, Arcane Blessing for even more scaling HP. This isn't necessary at all, especially on a build like this, because we're not using the different augment that will be shown in the second setup. We're basically unkillable as long as we are generating stacks because of our passive. Losing 15 stacks, getting that invulnerability, and then a little bit of health regen, build those stacks back up instantly and you are unkillable. Huge amounts of crit bonuses on your primary weapon. This build for me ticks all the boxes. But what if you want a setup that is more focused on damage and less on survivability? Well, that's where the second setup comes in, and it's pretty much identical except for one mod. That mod being Abundant Mutation. To me, this mod is kind of a double-edged sword. In some ways I really like it because it's very fun, but in others it's also taking away a bit of comfort which comes with playing Nidus. Abundant Mutation allows Nidus to, instead of capping out at 100 stacks on his mutation, you instead cap out at 300 total. This means the damage on your 4th ability Explosions and your Virulence is tripled, and due to Parasitic Vitality's health scaling based on how many stacks you have, you can get even more maximum HP upon linking to an enemy. However, the caveat is your passive Undying will have a 30-second cooldown. So whenever you die, lose 15 stacks, go invulnerable and gain 50% of your HP back, that window of invulnerability will be turned off for 30 seconds, and if you die during that period and lose all of your HP, you will just die. When it comes to scaling as far as possible in-game and going to something like level cap, this mod will be problematic, because eventually, even if you have like 60,000 plus HP with the combination of Abundant Mutation and Parasitic Vitality and Arcane Blessing, eventually that HP will be one-shot through. But let's be honest, even though he is an endless Warframe, not many people really go long enough in a mission to get to either level cap or to the point where you're going to be one-shotted through this HP anyway. He has plenty of damage reduction, armor, health regen, and yes, the combination of these two mods does allow you to hit a very large amount of total HP, and it's just a funny number to look at. But the primary use of this Abundant Mutation mod is the fact that you can get way more damage out of your stacks because of Virulence. But if you're the type of player to stay long enough in a mission to want to get 300 stacks, you will reap the rewards of this mod, albeit the build is overall less safe because you'll have a cooldown on your invulnerability window. And yes, the build is identical, except instead of Teaming Virulence, we're going with Abundant Mutation, and once again you could opt out Stretch for something like Overextended if it feels better for you. So that's going to about do it for my updated Nidus setup for the year. If anything changes or he gets, some upgrades, some new augments for example, I'll probably do a little revisit. Hope you guys enjoyed the inspiration in the video for the Dead Space stuff and the theme. I'd like to make these videos a bit more cinematic and creative where I can. Coming up with cool ideas without them being forced is something that only really comes whenever this game is really landing and inspiring me. For example, once this new update drops on the 19th, we're going to be cranking out hella content, so keep your eyes peeled for those videos on all of the Exalted Warframes. Leave all your feedback in the comments section. Hope you guys enjoyed the builds. Let me know if you try them, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.